Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email Marketing. And my guest today is Doug C. Brown, CEO of Business Success Factors. And it's Doug, not Douglas, right?
Well, if you're my mother, you'll call me Douglas, but
And
for most people,
my mom calls me Matt, and I make everyone else call me Matthew. So there
Matthew.
you go.
So
Yeah, yeah. Well, welcome. Doug's in snowy New Hampshire, and I'm in sunny Washington. So how weird is this? Doug, orient people a bit about. I mean, I read your background, which is really something, and we'll ask a bunch of questions about that. Orient them a bit about what you focus on now.
I focus on sales revenue growth for companies.
Okay.
So it's, sometimes that encompasses certain parts of sales,
Mm-hmm.
like as far as even training, right? So I do those type of things. But what I really do is I look at a company, I assess what's going on. I look at the whole customer journey. I figure out where do they have places that they can monetize that they're not monetizing today.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so, because most companies, most people in life, we all have blind spots.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I've never, ever, in the 20 years I've been doing this, never have seen a company that doesn't have a blind spot.
Right.
Um, and so most of them, have several of them. And so what we do is we assess everything. Then we figure out, are they able to grow? And if they are, then we help them put a plan together to grow. And many times they'll want us to implement the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's usually what I do with larger companies.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller companies, I run a university on sales revenue growth and conversational sales mastery. So I combine that together because, the companies like Intuit and Procter and Gamble, they have deeper pockets than say
Sure.
a company doing, $300,000 a year who still the same information applies.
Hmm.
It just, how do we deliver in a cost effective manner for both of us at that point?
Right. Right. What are there blind spots that you've come to expect?
Yes. Just, yeah. So over time, right? I mean, I remember Tony Robbins saying when I was listening to Tony one time, he's like, I've worked with over whatever it was, 70 million people or whatever. So, these common themes come out on a
Sure.
consistent basis. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with companies. I mean, I've worked with tens of thousands of businesses.
Wow.
So I start to see the overlap. I see the overlap of what's not really working, what is working,
Mm-hmm.
where are the most common mistakes. So, I'll give you an example. Companies are dropping the ball a lot on something as simple as referrals. They don't have an active referral program into their company. It's very
Okay.
passive.
Okay.
Follow-up
Mm-hmm.
is almost non-existent in many companies, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, re-engagement of old clients or dormant clients,
Mm-hmm.
through the use of follow-up, through the use of contact. But so there's those type of blind spots that are, everybody goes, well, that makes sense. Then there's the huge, like, okay, we got a people issue blind spot, right? Where I remember I went into a company one time and they had somebody that was their top salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to get rid of this person at all, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. But this person was the biggest disruption to the rest of the sales team.
Oh,
And they couldn't
interesting.
figure out why the rest of the sales team wasn't performing because
Mm-hmm.
they seemed like skilled people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told the owner, look, you need to move this gentleman down the trough a little bit or into a different division. Let's just move him off. Like, you don't have to fire him,
Mm-hmm.
just keep him. And as soon as we, that was a fight for like 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then after that, they moved this gentleman. They just said, trust me, just try it. Right.
Yeah.
So they moved this and all of a sudden productivity and sales started picking up in month one in
Wow.
their sales division. So what was
Okay.
happening was these sales reps were coming back and they're talking about it, but this guy was so mean, so nasty to the rest of the team
Right.
that the team was just kind of checking out and they didn't push forward.
Okay. Okay. Lost the motive, and that dominant personality is hard to get away from, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, there's every salesperson is a different type of personality.
Mm.
Sometimes, if you ask somebody, what's a salesperson? They go, well, it's slimy used car, peddler, right? Right. A lot of people will think of a salesperson like that, but in reality, there's different types of personalities and different ways of selling. One of the great books I've ever read in my lifetime was by Blair Singer. It's called Sales Dogs, actually. And he compares each individual salesperson to a breed of dog.
I'm
And
writing that down. Sales dogs?
Sales Dogs. Yeah, it was a great read. And, so some people are pit bulls, some people are golden retrievers, some people are poodles, some people, so like the pit bull just gets in there and just, grabs a hold of it and just starts shaking it. And, it's more disruptive. The poodle is I'm putting on the air. I have to drive in the most fancy car, the best suits, right? With the golden retriever or the Labrador or whatever, it's just like, pat me, love me. I'm your best friend, so everybody has their own personality, and we tend to use that personality when we're selling. So sometimes it just doesn't line up in a team atmosphere.
Well, it sounds like you had an alpha dog, or identified an alpha dog problem at that one company, right? Interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because I knew you had this deep background in sales and helping companies be effective at sales, and we could put this in the context of the last year and pandemic shift, or maybe a few more years, more and more mediated and digital communication, less and less face to face. But how's it affecting the cycle and the process of sales, where we're all quite inundated with messages and requests for our attention?
Sure. I mean, again, the purpose of a message is to get, attention, right? So we first make connection, and we've got to get some type of attention.
Yeah.
The problem is it a positive response from the receiver as the attention, or a negative response?
Yeah.
So what a lot of people don't think about is I just got 2 or 3 emails like this, Matthew, it's kind of weird. Hi, I'm, Joe from ABC Company. We do this for our clients. We're great because our clients say we're great. Here's what the great things that our clients say. I know if you do business with us, you'll be one of our great clients. It's just the kind of a theme. It's like all about them.
Yes.
Right. And so those emails immediately, most people, including myself, just go, yeah, bye. Right? and so they never get the chance, because today more than ever, it used to be important, but today more than ever, building a relationship and building rapport is far more important than it ever was. And part of the reason behind that is exactly what you said, the shift, the internet. Because people years ago, the seller actually had the information, and they could withhold that from the buyer.
Yeah.
Right. And use it strategically to their advantage. If you think, I just bought a new automobile, and, I went there and I was talking with a sales rep. But if you think about it now, as a buyer myself, I go up on the internet, I search out everything. I go, what's the safety ratings? What's this? What's that? What features do they have?
Yeah.
And so when I walked into the dealership, I was asking the salesperson questions like, okay, so in this model, the heated seats, are they also cooled?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because I want my wife to be comfortable in the wintertime. I want my wife to be comfortable in the summertime. Right?
Yeah.
Right? So, but he's saying things to me like, I didn't know we had those, cooling seats. Right. Because,
and you probably also went in informed about, sorry to cut you off, but you probably also went in informed about sales incentives and interest rate percentages, et cetera. Like you were as informed about the sales process, and that asymmetry of knowledge has flipped over.
Yeah. And so in any situation now that we're selling, most situations, we have to play win-win, and we have to be there and say, okay, what are the problems, fears, frustrations, wants, desires, needs, must-haves that my potential buyer wants? And so if we don't identify those things, then what people tend to do is they start pitching into their product or pitching into their service, and they're missing the real agenda, because behind every buying decision is a personal mission of some sort, personal agenda of some sort.
Oh, okay.
So somebody who might be buying something, I don't know, high end for a manufacturing company, for example,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to spend, I don't know, millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
They know that they might have to buy that, but their personal agenda might be to keep their job.
Right. Right.
Right. And so if their personal agenda is to keep their job, I want to know why. Right. Because, the more I can understand what the person is feeling, the more I can help that person to lower that fear and increase the buying confidence in that buying scenario.
Chase that thread for a moment, if you don't mind, and intersect back with the cold email that you mentioned that you get, that I get, that everybody gets. How does that sender who's trying some degree of mass outreach, poke, 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 can I get a response? Even if they were very diligent about identifying likely fits, how do they open the conversation and start the relationship so that some sense of what do you need, what's your mission in this, starts to play a role in a longer conversation?
Yeah, it's firstly, we have to send something to them that makes them go, wow, I want to know more about this.
Okay.
Right. Because if they go, so what, then it gets deleted or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So with a cold email, firstly, we want to figure out what are the most common pain points that are happening with the industry. So if I was to send a cold email, which I haven't done in a while, but if I was to start that process again, then I would send out and say, Matthew, you and I don't know one another. This is a cold email.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd read the next 2 lines, it'll tell you exactly what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd like to have a conversation on and around this, I'd be open to setting one up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thanks for your consideration.
Right.
That would be something. And in that 2 or 3 lines, it'd be like, well, Matthew, if you're looking for, your sales to grow in this capacity, are you frustrated with the current revenue growth of your company? Are you frustrated with the current sales team that you have? Mm-hmm. Do you know you can be doing better, but you're either not sure why it's not better, or you do understand and you're not sure how to implement it?
Right.
If any of these 3 apply to you, then I think I can help you.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And if you're interested, that would be my type of outreach, because mm-hmm. I want to build a relationship with this person. I just did this recently. So the second thing that I would do is, I didn't reach out cold with this person, but it was people who referred me to these people. So I reached out to them, which was sort of cold, but it wasn't cold.
Right.
And I had that type of email that went out similar, and I referenced the person, obviously, to get some familiarity.
Yeah.
But the second one I sent out was something to help them.
Right.
Right. I actually came across a resource that had a book that I could get the book for pretty much free. Mm-hmm. And I sent out and I said, listen, in the industry, this seems to be what is happening. And I found this book specifically on it. Mm-hmm. I just like to, if you want, you can just click on the link, download it off the site, mm-hmm. and it won't cost you anything, but I think it'll answer questions for you if you ever have these.
Nice.
Right. So it's about building the relationship. And I have a company right now that they're a bigger, not huge, but bigger company. They're doing, 500 million a year. And, I was able to help the CEO actually get published in something.
Okay.
Right. And so depending on what level you're playing will depend on what you're willing to spend to acquire that client. Mm-hmm. So if on a $500 million company, that's probably worth somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 or so to my company, right?
Right, yeah.
To help them. And if that's the case, then I'm more than happy to spend $5,000 to acquire that client.
Sure, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that we have to look at what our return on our investment will be, and then mm-hmm. determine on what we're going to do. I'm more than happy if it gets a CEO on a call with me that I have to spend $500 or $1,000 to get them published in Forbes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good bonding point. And so now the conversation shifts from, okay, who are you, kid, to, you know, okay, I like you, kid. You know, you still haven't proved to me everything, but I'm now there. I'm up on the hierarchy a little more in their likability scale. And so from there, then I can continue to keep doing it. But I do this consistently. Sometimes I will just send an email out, and this works great. Let's say you don't have anybody that you haven't talked to them in a while. We all have these, people in our life, right?
Yeah.
I just send out a simple one-liner. Hey, I was thinking of you.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering how you and your life are doing.
Right. Right. Nice. Right? Yeah.
And amazing, 95% of the time or whatever it is, it's high. I got a response.
Wow.
Hey, Doug, I was thinking about you last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Blah, blah, blah. How's this or how's that? Or, what are you up to these days?
Right,
I love that question.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's about personalization, and it's about building a relationship more than ever, because with the pandemic shift, it was coming anyways with the internet, but with the pandemic, companies have now figured out, wow, you know what? We don't have to pay all this high square footage or high square per meter,
right.
Cost. We're going to sell our building. We're going to sell this building for, $30 million. We're going to take that money. We're going to let people work remotely because we're getting the same level of productivity or even better in some cases.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of companies are doing. So it's going to continue to be more remote.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely accelerated the shift to, as you said, more remote, more through communication channels, less face to face. Live conferences are off the table for a while,
right.
a while to come. And those are all big changes. I think of them as even bigger changes for people who do or did a lot of face to face sales than for other jobs, other functions.
Well, exactly. I agree with you. And building rapport is different virtually than it is face to face.
Yeah.
You can't hug somebody. You can't shake their hand. You can't
have a beer and chit chat.
Exactly.
Honestly,
right. You can't. So when one's doing it virtually, we have to, I would say, communicate better. We always wanted to communicate, but it's really about what I would call active or proactive positive communication, right? So we're giving feedback to the person on a much deeper level than we would. So like if somebody said something like, hey, Doug, thanks. You just got promoted, right? An active, constructive feedback on something like that would be like, you coming up to me and saying, hey, Doug, you know what? I heard about your promotion. Listen, dude, you really deserved it. You come in here early, you leave late. You're the first guy in, you're always a team player. You absolutely deserve the promotion. That would be an active constructive.
Okay.
An active destructive would be something like, hey, Doug, congratulations on the promotion. I bet we needed some people at the top without hair. Right? Something like that, right?
You make it trying to be hairline.
Right. So, I lost mine at 28. So it's kind of like.
So did my dad.
So,
perfect heads don't need hair.
No, thank you. And, so, but there's also like passive constructive feedback, which would be something like, hey, Doug, good for you. I'm really happy for you. Right. That would be kind of passive. And then we have the passive destructive feedback, which is, oh, well, they had too many women on staff. I'm sure that's the reason, right? It's so we in the digital world, and a lot of people, I don't believe have figured this out yet, Matthew, but in the digital world, the more we can stay in the active, constructive side of the fence, the more people will be drawn to us.
Which implies, if I'm listening and learning here well, it puts a burden on you to actually have some knowledge of, it's the essence of relationship, right? Knowledge of the other person, knowledge of this situation, because an obviously made up or BS active constructive is probably going to misfire.
Uh, yeah. I mean, if it's pandering, or if it's
Blowing
if it's,
smoke.
yeah, right. The people are going to sniff it out. It has to be sincere. So it's relevant, sincere, honest communication
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. And most people really appreciate that, because most people have an agenda to hide something.
Mm.
I teach all my clients, when we're selling,
Mm.
we're going to be the first to disengage if this isn't the right thing.
Nice. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why would we do that? Because if you don't do that, you're going to call that person that you sold,
Mm.
because you were skilled enough to sell them, you're going to call them a bad client.
Mm. Yeah.
And the reality is there are no bad clients. There are bad decisions on the actual acquisition of a client, which leads to a problematic issue later on.
Right.
But I've never met anybody who's a bad client. I just, bad decisions on the front end. We took this on, we were reaching, we know we shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Now look, we're doing 10 times more of the work, and they're always complaining. Well, no kidding, because it wasn't well qualified or disqualified.
I had a young developer on our team here and I had him sit in on a call with early discussion with a company that was a potential client, and they asked for something. I can't remember what it was, but I said no. And later on, he's like, "You said no to that request." And I said, "Well, A, the correct answer was no. B, if I said yes, we're dead, right?
Huh?
Like, we're just dead. So we might as well be pretty clear that there are some boundaries up front. We're not going to do everything in the world to win their business if it's going to ruin us. So, fair is fair, and we got to be of the mindset if this is a great business relationship, it's mutually beneficial. If it's not, let's not do it. Be willing to say no.
Well, a lot of people, I mean, that's the best way, right? To me, it's the best way. It's, there's something called quality of life. And, because we have,
Here.
20 extra clients that are driving us insane and ruining our quality of life, or even two, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not worth it. And in the reality I find is most people who are in that mentality that they take things that they don't or shouldn't take, don't want to, but do anyways. Most of the time they just don't have enough lead flow. They're not prospecting enough. They're not driving an overabundance of leads so that they can be the person who screens through them first to get to the right ones.
Right.
And that's usually what I find the challenge to be.
Is challenge to be enough lead flow to actually make that sort of better scaled decision for both of you?
Right. I mean, think of it as, let's say there's 50 perfect leads, but there's 500 almost perfect leads, right? And you have only those 50 that you can work. So now we're going to man, I got to hit quota. I got to do this. I got to do that. We're going to try to twist them in any way we can.
Yeah.
Not me, but a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if I had 500 and they were all talking to me, I'm going to be a heck of a lot more relaxed and a lot more clear about what I want, what I don't want at that point, because I know my odds are better.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get the leads going to a place and then get more quality leads in the front end, then what ends up happening is you have more quality conversations. As we have more quality conversations, those lead to either presentations, or if you do it right, you don't even have to have a presentation. It leads to sales. But it all starts on the front end. But salespeople in general, or people selling, they don't think about the whole customer journey. And that includes how they're bringing them in, right?
Right.
So, they might get a lead handed off from marketing, for example, but they have no idea what the marketing was actually doing. They've never read it. They don't know what's in it. They just know they got a lead. And that's where part of the challenge, comes in, because marketing and sales really shouldn't be separate. They should be one unit.
Totally agreed. Yeah, totally agreed. I'm curious to take this down. This may be a rabbit hole with no rabbit at the other end, but you're certainly the right guy with the expertise to ask about this. We've got the tools of automation to try to fake it, to fake those active constructive conversations, to try to fake the personal and personalized, not my favorite word, thing that gets the door open. And I'll throw out an example just so we got something to kick around. Partially deliberately, I put the doctor in front of my first name inside LinkedIn in my profile.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a dead giveaway when I'm getting some pain in the ass robo invite.
Right.
Like they clearly didn't read it. Hey, Dr. Matthew. Nice try. Wrong, right? You scraped it, you put it in a form, you send it to me, delete.
Mm-hmm.
And someone who does take the time to do that says, oh, his name's Matthew. Got it. Great. Okay, that's better. But how do we navigate those tricky thresholds of sniffing out the genuine, the personal, this could go somewhere for both of us from the absolute bombardment of faked?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to a few different things. Number one, we consistently we proceed how we begin. Right? So if we are doing Dr. Matthew, type things, then we have now invoked a response from you, which is negative.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are going to proceed even with other communication as this is more challenging for you to get your attention. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing is that if you got an email that said, Dr. Matthew, I've been researching the Washington area and I found you there.
Right.
And I also noticed that you went to ABC College, which is where my uncle went. Right there would change the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Because now it's not the spammy email that you will know what it's going to be. So we continue. So the big part is when people are doing mass emails like that, and I don't recommend that people do that, especially if they're a sales person. It's like, look, if you want to send automated messages, is fine, but send a few of them at a time and take a little bit of time and research the person.
Yeah.
Right. So, I cannot tell you how many times people call upon me, never looked at my anything, LinkedIn, anything. I've had people call me up and go, hey, what part of the country are you in? I'm like, dude, you called me, right?
You couldn't find this out? Yes, you could.
Exactly, right? And, and I have a Texas phone number because I used to live in Texas at one time. And, I live in New Hampshire, which is where I grew up in this area, but I never got rid of my Texas number. So I know that when somebody calls me up and they go, hey, Doug, listen, I see you're in Texas, right? I know they at least looked at that. And so I give them a little more of a chance.
Yeah.
And with email, the same thing, the more relevancy that, and it, by the way, it's not hard to find, right? I mean, I'm a veteran of the United States Army. It's not hard to find. It's on my profiles.
12 years.
12 years. Thank you. Yeah. So it's not hard to find that information, but if somebody sent to me and said, hey, Doug, I see you were in the military, the United States Army, first, thanks for your service or whatever they want to say. Right. Or, I find this really great. I appreciate you for whatever, anything like this, anything. And, I also see that, by your LinkedIn profile, you live in New Hampshire. I'd like to tell you what I do in a couple of lines. And then if you want to read more, please do. And if you'd like to schedule an appointment, here's a link that we could talk, to make it convenient upon you, or send me your secretary or your link or whatever.
Right.
And I'll be happy to. Something like that just is different than what everybody else is sending out there. You don't have to talk about your products and services. You just have to talk about what are the problems they're having, make it relevant, make it consistent, right? And the other thing is, once you start the relationship, make them laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Because people love humor. Yeah, we love humor. So, I found a crazy picture of something, and I was like, man, this just made me laugh, right? I mean, nobody's getting hurt. It's not political. It's not religious, right? It's not spouse bashing, which is the three you want to definitely stay away from. It was just something that was good, clean, fun humor. And so I sent it to a couple friends. I said, what do you think of this? And they said, this is hilarious. So now I use it in my correspondence. I'll send it out, if you have, hey, Matthew, I'm just sending this to you because, sometimes we get so mired down in business and in life, sometimes we have a few stressors. Hopefully this will make you laugh a little and lighten your day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's all I send,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And visual one-liner.
Yeah. And you know what I mean? But if people did that type of thing, I have they were a client and I've trained their people, and I'm in good contact with some of them now. And they still use humor today, and they're getting into Fortune 50 companies, using humor.
Oh, nice.
Right. Because it gets them laughing.
Yeah.
Like one of the guys, he'll send something out and he go, geez, Matthew, I've been trying to get a hold of you. I mean, it's been 12, 13 attempts. I've been trying to get a hold of you. You're harder to get a hold of than my wife's, whatever, lover or whatever he says, and then he says, Mr. George Clooney, right? That type of thing.
Yeah.
And, my wife's boyfriend, that's what he says. My wife's boyfriend, Mr. George Clooney. Right. And people laugh. Yeah. And they respond to him, and they'll send it back and they go, that was really funny. I appreciate that. Right. That's what we're looking for, is to start to build because remember, behind every corporate buying decision is a personal agenda. So we must address both of those. And what doesn't hit in the emails that you're talking about with you and I that we receive and everybody else does is they're talking about a potential corporate agenda without addressing the human nature which it's attached to.
Yeah, the person with the personal agenda. There's a message I got. It's like the third or fourth in a sequence the other day, and I just wanted to smack the screen. Gee, I'm sorry if I seem persistent for emailing you again, but you didn't respond. I'm thinking, that's right, I didn't respond. That was the signal. It's not my monkey to unsubscribe. Especially since I never said you have permission to bombard me in the first place. And watching the fads and fashions of cold email, the fake in the subject line, the fake forward in the subject line, that worked, and then that got old and tired and stuff. I'm like, this is it's exhausting. And at the same time, there's some degree of, that's the sea you're swimming in, even if you sit down and spend half an hour learning about someone's company and try and do a genuine, sincere, look, I think there's a huge opportunity for both of us. Can we talk?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because, look, people are like all of us, they don't want to get emails like that. Yeah. That are being sent out, but those people are running the odds, right? They're probably putting those emails out from somewhere, not even the United States. They might be coming from a different server where, they're paying $1,000 a month and they'll continuously send out emails to people. And so they're running the numbers, if there's 100,000 emails that go out and we get a 2% response, we got 2,000, and then that's what they're doing. So, if you're selling anything of substance or tangibility, that has value to it, I wouldn't send that type of email ever.
Yeah. There was I can't remember what the magazine was. I'm thinking it was Fortune, but back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, when people were first starting to get email addresses and SMTP, internet email, had won the day. Some article put Bill Gates' Microsoft address, billg@microsoft.com, like in this article about email. Of course, he just got flooded, right? Yeah. And those of us that work in that, in the digital sphere, or particularly with email for a long time, are like, why did it take a magazine article to make this, obvious? But it did, and that prompted Gates to talk about the beginning of the problem of spam at the time. Right. And he said, the real pity with email is that there's no cost to send.
Right.
If we put a cost of a penny a send on every email server out there, we'd have a lot less spurious behavior because that offshore, I'm going to send thousands of them. 2% success is 98% you're a pain in everybody else's behind filling up their inbox, but it's okay. Somehow it's acceptable.
Well, it's in certain places like Europe, it's become less acceptable.
Yes.
Right. So they've been putting in all kinds of laws to, and in my humble opinion, a little bit beyond reasonable, some of the stuff that they're asking for.
Interesting.
But I understand why they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
They're because of that reason.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of, hey, if you send an email, it costs you a penny, because they're not going to send in a million emails anymore.
Right.
Right. They'll have to, the game will have to get real.
Yeah.
And I bet somebody like Bill Gates or Google or MailChimp or whoever, would be more than happy to charge a penny an email, and collect the revenue coming in. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. And, for those of us who do have the freedom to send, again, if you send a personalized email, that's not going to be construed as spam, even by the law in Europe.
Right.
For the most part, right? I mean, you didn't, they were on a list, you didn't know it, but it wasn't that spammy email. So when the government official looks at it, in higher probability, it's going to be like, well, look, this guy's trying to build a relationship with you. He's not, or she's not, or they're not doing whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's just much more favorable. And the reality is, if people, like you said, they took time to research and sent a thoughtful, connecting type email to somebody, instead of sending 500 of these things, you could send 20 of them and get better response.
Right. Think of the relationship and invest in that. Don't just hit the mail merge. But
yeah, I mean, mail merge as it's if you have a list and people are subscribing, it has its purpose, right?
Yeah.
But for cold outreach, it has its purpose too. I just, here's the other thing that people don't think about. What if you send 500 emails and 500 people respond to you?
Yeah. Oops.
Right. Yeah. And they all want personalized one-on-one meetings.
Right.
And they all need it in the next 30 days. How are you going to do that?
What are you going to do? I've watched the evolution of text and mobile messaging with a good deal of curiosity over the last couple of decades. And there was a moment where it looked like that might become a common form for everybody. I don't think that's going to happen now for a variety of both technical and privacy reasons. But I still get the occasional unsolicited inbound text, and somehow that's much more bothersome.
Oh yeah, because it's firstly, it pops up on your phone a lot of times, or it makes a noise, right? So it's interrupting. And then you're like, wow, this might be important. So you check it.
Yep.
And then it's like, I had like 3 or 4 of them on my phone in the last 2 weeks. And it's kind of, you check the message and it's like, hey, make $1,000 a day, blah, 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 go to this, bit.ly link, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it's like, block, right? Yeah. Because there's no, you might be expecting a text message from somebody that you care about or important or whatever, right? Yeah. And, like if you sent me a message or I sent you a message, you'd probably be like, oh, hey, Doug, how you doing, right? But that type of spammy type of thing, there is a market for that and it works, but it's not something that I would employ or recommend anybody.
Me neither. It's such a high psychological cost interrupt that you're really going to backfire if I didn't want it. Or if, I don't even know who you are. It's not like we remember phone numbers. So the unknown phone numbers sort of automatically. Are you, like you or people on your team getting the volume of spurious robocalls as well? They're making me nuts.
It used to be really bad.
Yeah.
For some reason it's backed off. They have robocall blockers, that you can,
and stuff like that.
Yeah. And, but it used to be bad. But what I love are the ones that actually are using computers that are sound human. Right? They sound.
Yes.
And so I can always tell when they're a computer by the way they ask the question. So I know there's a person pushing buttons on the other side.
Yeah.
So being a sales, professional, I play with them. I'm like, they'll go, the old "how you doing today" line comes up most of the time with these things. And, it's like, I will play with them. My daughters are like, Dad, I can't believe you say these type of things, but the reality is they'll call in, they'll say, hey, this is John calling from ABC Painting Company, how you doing today? Right. And I go, well, quite frankly, I found out I have venereal disease, and my doctor says I might have less than a week to live. Da 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 da, and I'm going on. My wife's rolling her eyes, right? And then they come back on, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what button to push, or they'll come back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry." I say, "Well, why are you sorry? Are you the one who passed along the venereal disease?" Right? I will say stuff like this, and then eventually you'll just hear it go click.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I do this because I like to have fun with people, number one, but I want to see what their responses are, right? Because that type of technology is not a bad technology if they used it appropriately. It's like every tool.
Yeah. I've been getting a ton of, and I don't know why, a ton of calls where there's silence on the other side. And I got to assume the agenda is voice sampling. So increasingly, if I don't recognize the number, I'll answer and not say a word. Because a person would go, hi, is anybody there? They could hear the pickup.
Right, exactly.
And the fake call is going to not know what to do with that. Thinking, wow, so it's cost effective to call millions of people at random and sound sample the silence. Oh, okay.
Well, because they're using VoIP technology or some type of internet technology, right? Yeah. So there's no termination charges at the telecommunications end. I mean, if we, when we were charged for long distance, it'd go from the local company to the regional company to the long distance company back to the local company, and that's how we made a call. Everyone wanted to get paid.
You just dated both of us, because I'm chuckling in appreciation and remembrance of. We used to talk to the grandparents on Christmas Eve because it was so expensive on Christmas.
Oh, absolutely. And AT&T made a lot of money making people feel guilty because they're not calling their mother on Mother's Day,
Right.
But the reason they did that is, long distance could be 50 cents a minute.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's some long distance bills with college girlfriends or whatever that definitely created some problems. Hey, I've got a completely off topic question for you, if you're okay with it. Do you still find time to sing?
Actually, I'm finding more time now than I ever have before.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I'm at a place in life now where it's like, I want to make a good quality living, but I don't have to prove to the world anymore how smart I am, right? That type of thing.
Yeah.
Because, we all grow up I grew up in an environment where good was never going to be good enough.
Okay.
And so to prove I'm good or good enough, I always have to be number one. I always had to be there, and I always tried to do it respectfully. And most times I was, but I'm at a place now where I step back, and I just did this a couple of weeks ago. And I said, you know what? One of the mistakes that business owners make is they don't build out a life's plan first. They start a business and then they adapt their life to the business. And I've certainly been more than guilty from doing that, getting up early in the morning, getting up at 5 o'clock, work until midnight, go to bed at 1 o'clock, get back up, that type of thing. But what I realized at this place in my life now is music is really more important to me than it even was when I was in my rock and roll days, with the bands.
Yeah.
So but it's a different appreciation now,
Yeah.
And so, so I'm definitely, I'm making time to do it.
Yeah.
And that's part of my life's thing. Cause I sat down and said, okay, what do I really want my life to be? How much money do I actually want to make? Right.
Yeah.
And I know some people think hearing this, if they're entrepreneurial, they go, well, that's crazy. Not really.
Not really. Good for you.
It's not, because we all think we have tomorrow or even this afternoon, and we don't.
Yeah.
Right. One day that'll end. So I look at this and I say, okay, what's the quality of life I want? Yeah. Now I'm going to build my business. Like, my business is being built around all of that. I want, awesome. Not only the traveling, I want the ability to, have time during the day to have quality conversations with the people I care about.
Yeah. I had looked at, if you're listening on the podcast, I had read through Doug's LinkedIn bio and noted that he was at Berklee College of Music. That's as vocal major, I think, and that's how I knew about singing. What kind of stuff do you like to do now?
Music wise,
Yeah,
or just
music wise.
I still love rock.
Yeah.
And you
What
know,
kind?
I'm 59 years old, and obviously my children think I'm too old to be a rock star now, but the I disagree with that.
Yes.
But I thought of starting a band and calling it 50, 55 plus or something like
I
that.
like that. I like that.
So, because I was involved, as you know, with some of the biggest musicians in the world at the time, back when I was doing this. And
Mhm.
for your listeners, I mean, I worked with Boston, I worked with Aerosmith, I worked with Billy Joel's band, I work, those type of people.
Yeah. Wow.
And I had a great time. It was
Yeah.
a wonderful time in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I just decided I don't want to be on a tour bus 300 days a year for 5 years straight. Right. That's kind of what
Not a life either.
yeah. And, and that's okay for people like the Grateful Dead. They did it their whole life and they liked it. Right. So,
Yeah.
but I just, I was going to have a family. I wanted some different things. I just wanted to, but really now more than ever, Matthew, I'm going back toward things like the theater and,
Really?
musicals. And yeah, because it gets me a chance to sing, but it gives me
Yeah.
a chance to also
Perform.
act in a
Yeah.
live setting,
Yeah.
when these things come back more.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a lot more songwriting than I have in the past as well.
Excellent.
So yeah.
Wow. That's I didn't know you had a theater bug as well. That was actually my first career. So I totally get.
Well, there is a high correlation between sales, music, and theater. Like the high, because in sales, you can be the constructive person that provides logical information,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have to be kind of that entertainer, right? So it's,
Yeah.
we got to provide information and entertainment, and it's got to be kind of balanced.
And you also have to be. Actually, I think the next guest on the podcast who I'm talking with next week is my friend Skip Fedora, and he had mentioned that his daughter had the theater bug. And we were emailing back and forth, and I unfortunately I sent him this page-long rant about why that was great. He's like, if she's going to go off in college and study theater, trust me, she's learning stuff that'll pay off her entire life for all the reasons you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I do when I do live sales trainings is I'll take and I'll do an improvisation
Yeah.
session, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of people like I'm not a big fan of scripts. I don't mind scripts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind templated stuff for people to look at and follow, but I want it to sound natural. And so when we take these things and we put them into the improv side, they've got to spontaneously react to it in order to keep the improv going. And what's nice about that is it trains the human brain on how to do that in sales as well. It's okay to have formulas. Like I have formulas when I take people through discovery calls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, because they might go from step 1 to step 5.
Yeah.
And the problem with using a script
Yeah.
is the person that we're speaking with,
Yeah.
they don't know you have a script and they don't know what their part is. The script is.
That's precisely why you threw the VD monkey wrench in the phone call, right? Is to see if they were actually listening, not just following the rote steps in
Exactly.
the script, having a little fun with their structure. Yeah. The other thing about musicians and music and theater background, I think is you really have to listen. If you're part of an ensemble, you have to listen to what the other guys are doing.
Yeah, without question, because sometimes your bandmates will not do what you're doing.
Right. Or you're like the drummer's lagging, so you better adapt, or the whole thing's gonna kind of fall apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And music, as you know, there's all of these dynamic things going on, and you still have the audience.
Mm-hmm.
The reactions of that, the sound, light, people, everything's going on. So it's not just, people think that, I don't know, Paul McCartney gets up and, probably today he does, gets up on stage and, and everything just goes perfect. Right. Because I was just, I don't know if you know, Matthew, but I used to be a professional DJ as well. Right. So that was,
really?
yeah.
Cool.
So I did lots of high-end corporate events and
Uh-huh.
weddings, high-end stuff, like really,
Okay.
$200 plus a plate type stuff.
Okay.
And I was one of the top guys in the Boston area doing it at that time. And, for reviews and getting paid quite a bit. I mean, we used to get paid $2,000 to $3,000 a
Wow.
job as a
Yeah.
DJ.
Wow. Nice.
Right. But the reality is that I was just saying this today. So somebody asked me this question. Actually, it was my wife. She asked me this question. What was the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you out in the DJ world? Right. So I'm telling her stories. She's like, are you kidding me? We used to do this. I remember this one time we used to do this choreographed thing with in a wedding when New York was a big song to do at a wedding.
Okay.
But what we used to do is we'd get the whole bridal party, the whole audience out on the dance floor around the bride and groom. And I would say things like, hey, Joey and Melissa are, so grateful. They love each and every one of you. They thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. And then the crowd would go, yeah, that's great. Whatever. Right. And then I'd say, in fact, they appreciate you so much that they told me that they're going to take you on a trip with them. And now Joey and Melissa are looking at me like, what are you doing? Right. And I'm like, in fact, they also told me that all expenses are going to be paid out of pocket 100% from them for you. And now the crowd's like, whoa. I'm like, folks, lock your arms together. Let's get around these two lovebirds a little more. And we bring them in. I'm going to move in a little bit more. In fact, right now, Joey and Melissa are going to take you all the way to New York City. And that was the cue for New York to kick in.
Yeah.
Right. And as soon as it did, people, I would get them starting to sing and they're dancing. And the videographer loved me because it's like, oh my gosh, see all these pictures. Right. But one time I said, all the way to New York City. And what I heard was funky town. Right. So it's like, I'm like, oh, they cued the wrong music. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you learn in those situations in music or in theater or production, how to recover very quickly.
Yeah.
And that is a must in human to human communication and
Yeah.
sales.
Yeah. 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 And to not crash to a halt and apologize. Why? Because you know it happens. You get used to the fact that it's going to happen. It's like, oh, you dropped a line? Yeah, someone's dropped a line. Oh, it's going to happen.
Exactly. And what I said in that case was, I said, but before we go to New York, we're going to Funky Town, right?
So, yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Right.
So,
because you stayed in the moment.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, most of the people didn't even know there was anything different. And the person caught my vocal over the loudspeakers and they went, oops, got the wrong thing. So they started bringing and faded back into the right song.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it was a blip for 20 seconds and people loved it.
It's a good story though. It's a good story. So you are finding time to sing rock and roll.
I am. To the, I'm not sure to the pleasure or disagreement of my daughters, but
daughters are how old?
20, 22.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And
they both,
they both have been in either theater. Well, both of them have been in theater, ballet, and or music. And I don't know. I used to say, thank God you got the voice of your mother, but I mean, their vocal quality and compared to mine is just amazingly better.
Nice. Wow.
And so they're really smart and they're good kids and, I love them obviously. So, I'm a proud dad in that regard as well. So, but I'm finding them very like using music as a leverage point, like my oldest daughter, Rebecca, or even Jacqueline, my youngest daughter. But Rebecca, one time I went and she was doing a speech. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like she was graduating from something. So they asked her to come up and do a speech. And when she got up there, she knew how to work the audience like crazy. I was like, I'm like, okay, that's me, right? I know that's me. Because, she was able to tell, clean, nice jokes and pull the audience in. And she just knew how to do it naturally. So I'm like, okay, well, hanging out with me and probably Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes and all these other people
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
paid off, right,
Yeah.
in ways that I never thought. But they're both very, capable salespeople. So from a father's perspective, I don't even worry about them financially because they're going to be fine no matter what.
Nice. Nice. And they're going to use those skills, whatever they're doing. Doesn't have to have a sales label on it.
No, 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 no. My oldest daughter is into hair, cosmetology, that type
Uh-huh.
of thing, right? She loves that. But in her brain, it's like, okay, how do I sell lots of product? Because that's where the profit is in that business, right?
Mhm.
In the cosmetic world and all of the other things that whatever they do there. And in her mind, she's talking to me about that. I'd like to maybe open up 12 locations over my lifetime and
Mhm.
da da da. And I'm like, oh gosh, all right, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, she just she's turning 22 soon. And I think that's a good sign for a person that age to really be kind of hyper focused on what do they want to do and what kind
Yeah.
of lifestyle do they want.
Yeah. It does seem like I have two sons and they're similar in age, a little just slightly older. It does seem like their generation is a little more likely to be thinking about doing their own thing, running their own business than our 22-year-olds were.
Oh yeah, for several reasons. One, they watched our generation, go to school, get a degree, go work for a
Job.
company, and
Yeah.
you'll be happy, kid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then they've watched their parents grow up, and all of a sudden, 2, 3, 4 layoffs or whatever's happening to
Yeah.
them, and the parents are all stressed out, and they're like, it's
Yeah.
not going to be for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I'm not even gonna go work for under $60,000 a year. It's not even gonna be in my entertainment of my mind. A lot
Yeah.
of the,
Well, an
um,
entrepreneur wasn't a word,
no,
honestly.
no, no. But I mean, it was for me because my dad was, I started working with him at the age of 3 in his business. So,
Okay. Wow. Cool.
you know, um, it was for me because I grew up that way. But I would go to school from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock, and I was out of school by 10:45, 11 o'clock, and I went right to work for his company.
Okay. Wow.
So for me, it was just kind of normal. Like, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he hired me for less, labor costs than he would have had to hire a, person 3 times my age. But um, I also think he taught me a lot of lessons that I still carry with me
Sure.
today through doing what he did. And so, I did the same thing with my daughters. I mean, I had them, they were in their first tax seminar when they were 5 years old. And people thought they were adorable,
Yeah.
right? And they're very well mannered, and they were sitting there and they're trying to, because I know absorption, osmosis of information would get brought in some capacity, and that's what I was hoping for them.
Yeah.
And I can see them now at their young age, especially when we're talking about email or we're talking about whatever, they are far less tolerant of that than I am, certainly.
Interesting.
Right? Because there's a certain standard that they feel that everybody, in social media or in email or in, and so I asked them, I said, is this just you two? And they're like, no, Dad. It's like everybody we hang out with, this is, you have to have a certain way about you in social media, right? And you're highly judged in social media based on how you do this. And so they're teaching me all this stuff that, is coming up from their generation.
Yeah.
And, where I'm like, well, okay, if there's a typo here and there, who cares? If I helped you make $2 million, you're not going to care if I have 2 typos in my whatever, right? But they're telling me in their generation, and I found in Europe, especially like over in Eastern Europe, even more, they judge you immediately off those type of things.
Well, I'm working on a side project with a friend of mine, and we were both in long-term relationships. So he's like, we're going to sign up and look on his phone at Tinder. He said, I got to tell her I'm doing this because of this business project. But he was swiping through, and he said, it's literally first impression, swipe this way or swipe that way. Like that's what you've got.
Right.
Is that photo impression
right
to lead to anything else? And your daughter's generation, like their acuity and speed at processing all of those little cues. It's quite
Yeah.
astonishing. Really.
Well, they're a lot faster than I am. I
Yeah,
can tell
yeah,
you that
yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
I'm
Right.
sure. Yeah, ditto, ditto. But
You know, I mean, I know that, they learn from, it's the old thing. My mother used to say this to me when I was growing up, and I never understood it when I was growing up, and nor did I agree with it when I was growing up. When I was younger, she said, Doug, it's really sad that, wisdom is wasted on the old and energy is wasted on the youth. Right. And I'd be like, Mom, that's ridiculous,
right,
and what do I know? I'm 13, 14 years old. She's saying
right,
these things to me. Right.
right.
But now as I become 59, I realize exactly what she's saying because,
Yeah,
I deal with hundreds, if not thousands of people, sometimes a month and have conversations,
yeah.
whether it's in a group environment or one-on-one.
Mhm.
And, a lot of these people have the wisdom of sort of given up, right? They get to
Huh.
that place, but I'm seeing a resurgence of the over 60 crowd now, the over 50 crowd, right? Where they're like, there's a resurgence going on. And I think in part it's because of the internet, because of social media, because now they're realizing, you know what? I don't have to, in my twilight or late years, I don't have to retire. I can go build a tiny $100,000 a year business, help a bunch of people because I am wise,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. To me, knowledge is
Yeah.
you get the information. Wisdom is you've made so many, you've learned from mistakes, right? So we can teach them the mistakes. And I find a lot of people now in that generation are coming toward the online side and they're starting smaller education type businesses,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool.
That is cool. That is cool. It's maybe we have a way of passing on some of those lessons that's better than just saying goodbye and watching them sail off in an RV.
Yeah, and the challenge for for people, if we don't embrace those people, these people have experience. I mean, they have life's experience, and
Yeah, yeah,
you can't buy that unless you can buy it in the form of talking to somebody like that.
yeah.
But and I see the younger folks coming up. Not my daughters, but a lot of the younger folks coming up. They don't have a concept on how to do basic business skills or how to conversationally sell. They don't. So I got a call the other day. I was on a call and the gentleman asked me, he said, "Hey, would you be interested?" I won't name the university because, because of the, everybody would know it. But they have an entrepreneurial program here and I have 6 universities that my stuff is in and I would like them to talk to you because the number one challenge that all these entrepreneurs in these entrepreneurial programs are having is they don't know how to sell.
Yep. I'm
Right.
sure.
So they come up with these great ideas. The kids are really, and I mean, they're SaaS companies. They're, I mean, they walk technical circles around me, even though I have a technical background. But what they don't understand is exactly what we've been talking about through this whole thing. How do you have a communication loop that is proactive in building a relationship
Mm-hmm.
that leads to conversations, that leads to sales?
Yeah, yeah. And it leads to relationships that may not be sales now, but that in itself is a much more important outcome, right?
I had well, without question, because if we can enhance somebody's life or better somebody's life, like even what we're doing here on this podcast, if one idea sparks somebody and goes, wow, okay, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But now I get it. I see it that way. And I think I'll embrace that. And they try it and it goes and it's successful.
Yeah,
It's worth doing it. Right. Because we just keep planting seeds everywhere.
yeah, yeah.
And before you know it, you walk back to that location and you go, wow, there's a tree there.
There's a tree
Right
there.
there.
Yeah, whole
And,
forest.
and I've had that happen where I've helped people 6, 7, 8 years prior. And,
Mm-hmm.
they just asked me some advice. I told them the advice of what I would do
Mm-hmm.
based on my life's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And they went and implemented and I hadn't seen it for 7 years. They come back and they go, yeah, I got a $33 million company, something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, what happened? Well, over the last 7 years, I've been building this thing up and, that conversation we had in the hotel lobby,
Yeah.
or whatever it was, really kind of orientated myself to think, okay, I probably should do this instead of that. And so I did that and it worked out and I got funding or whatever it might be. Right. So
Yeah, yeah.
I really think it's important for us because, I mean, really, Matthew, you can't take all this with you, right? So you might as well enjoy it while we're here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't go through spreadsheets at your funeral. There's
That's
always
funny.
musicians, though.
That's funny. Do I have permission to use that one?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's like, yeah, it's the digital. You can't take it with you, right? Yeah,
Right.
wait, that line you used, that's in Wonderful Life. The guy in the t-shirt's like, youth is wasted on the wrong people. That's kind of what your mother was saying.
Oh, interesting. Man, I wonder if that's where my mom got it from. I mean, she was born in 1934,
That
so I don't know.
that movie did not get popular until the rights slipped over to the public domain and Turner started broadcasting it over and over on the holidays.
Oh,
It was
okay.
actually forgotten for like 30 years. And then it because of the timing of the changes of copyright law, and I believe someone bobbled the copyright renewal. That movie went into the public domain, so Turner could broadcast it without paying a cent
Oh, cool.
for a span of time there. And now it's it's immortal class. It's one of my favorite movies, but for good reason. But it was was undiscovered for a while. Well, here we go. I managed to chew up well over an hour of your time, but what a heck of a conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had a good time here. It's been fun.
Yeah, likewise. Last question before I let you go. Any book recommendations aside from Sales Dogs?
Aside from my book.
Oh, that's right. I saw author by your name, but I didn't
Yeah.
traverse down. What's the title of your book?
So I wrote a book called Win-Win Selling: Unlocking the Power of Profitability by Resolving Objections.
Okay.
And it's really about communication.
Hmm.
The reason I put it in objections is because, the hardest thing for salespeople or people selling, companies, people, whoever, owners, is, getting enough leads,
Okay.
which I'm writing a book on now. And
Good.
the second thing is, how do I handle objections?
Hmm.
Because people don't understand. And so I go deep into the psychology and the philosophy about how objections actually manifest in a conversation. And believe it or not, they all start from our youth. And so the things we were taught in our youth, we carry forward in habits,
Hmm.
right? In a lot of ways. And so I talk about frames, and I talk about, how to change frames, and why frames come about, and, how things actually evolved, because we learn things from our grandparents. So we learn things from our parents, or we learn things from any of our caretakers.
Hmm.
And then we start habituating the behavior. So I'll give you an example. It's not an objection, but my dad, when I worked for him all those years, he built a business on his back. He was a really smart guy, but he didn't build a business of leverage. He had employees,
Hmm.
but everything came back to him.
Okay.
So for the first, from my time I was like 20 to the time I was about 35, guess what I did?
Same
Right? Monkey see, monkey do, so to speak, right? In the old statement. And so we do that with communication as well. So if someone grew up in an environment, and I've seen this happen so many times in sales, one grew up in an environment that everything has to be negotiated.
Hmm.
Everything.
Hmm.
I've seen people in sales literally where the buyer goes, yeah, okay, I'll take it. And they go, yeah, but let's talk about this, right? Let's renegotiate this.
Right. Right.
And I'm like kicking them under the table, like just push the paper
Yeah.
forward. They said yes,
Exactly,
right?
yes,
And
yeah.
and I've literally seen people undo sales. I mean, there was a real estate agent one time. This couple had this house, and it was a couple $1 million house, and 6% commission on $2 million, right? 120 grand. And the real estate agent's showing it, and the wife is like, I really want this house. And the husband's going, well, hon, I don't know. It's kind of at a higher end. So their husband and wife's going back and forth, and I'm listening to this, and I'm in the room going back and forth. And she goes, yeah, I really want. He goes, well, I guess we could do that. She goes, hon, it will make me really happy. And he goes, well, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, we could stretch it a little bit. And the real estate agent literally said this, guys, this is a really important decision for you. Where you live and what you do is extremely important. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is, why don't you take the night and think it over? And I'm like, you have to be kidding me.
Right.
Right. Right. Now, the crazy part of this story is they didn't buy from this person and they went and bought a house that was $400,000 more than they were asking for the house there. So it wasn't a situation that they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It was a situation that the real estate agent, in her own way, heard this as an objection,
Yeah.
going back and forth between the husband and wife, and her empathy kicked in versus serving them with like a moral obligation that they want this house, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
She let that scripting kick in and she threw the objection out, which stopped the whole sale.
Fascinating. And you say a lot of that will be patterned in youth.
Oh, it totally. I mean, if you think about it, and in the book I go through in more detail, but the language patterns that somebody uses gets passed on, and once it's absorbed in, the old, hey, Grandpa, you want to take me out to play ball? Well, I can't do that right now.
Right.
Well, why not? Why, Grandpa? Right? Well, I'm really busy. Maybe later.
Cat's in the cradle, right?
Yeah, maybe later, right? The cat's in the cradle, right? So maybe later. Well, Grandpa, what? Why? Well, because I said so. It's that type of conversation, which people think, hey, what's wrong with that conversation? But then, he or she, they learn how to be put off by Grandpa, right? So now, fast forward years, they're selling. They're talking with an older dominant male, and the dominant male is going, "Yeah, I can't see you right now. You know what? Call me in 3 months." And they go, "Okay." Right? Where that older person who's a driving personality is testing the salesperson to see, do they have the mettle to actually stand up to them in order to gain mutual respect, because that's the type of sales professional they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I go into the book on different scenarios like this because people, when they read it, they go, wow, geez, I never even thought of things like this. And, and the reason I wrote the book is I couldn't find anything on it anyway. People saying, well, if they say this, you say that. And that doesn't work most of the time.
Yeah. But you can't keep all in your head.
No. And plus, you might say, they say this and then they say that back. And all of a sudden it's like that drives more fear into the buyer because there was no thought of what is the human connection that's going on.
Right. Oh, I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm going to get my hands on it.
Thank you.
Well, cool. I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you, Doug. This has been a wonderful conversation. My guest has been Doug C. Brown. You can find his business at businesssuccessfactors.com. And Doug, thanks so much for the time.
Matthew, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to stop the record.